In the 80s and the 90s, the Contra games were the running gun game to have. Sure, there were others that popped up here from time to time, however, Contra was the king. Starting with just Contra and then Super C, and a game that's not really Contra, and then moving on to Hardcore and to Alien Wars, this series was unstoppable. And like any successful series, if there was a home console version, the company had to cash in and create a Game Boy version as well. And we got not one, but two Game Boy Contra games, Operation C and the Alien Wars. The first being its own game and the second being a port of an SNES classic. So today, let's break down these two Game Boy games and see if they live up to the legacy the series created on the home consoles. Operation C was the first of the two Contra games and is based heavily on Super C for the NES. However, despite using a very similar engine, this game is completely its own game. In this Contra, you're following the story of Bill Reiser, who's on a mission to take out the alien cell at its core, and no, the cover isn't exactly accurate. You don't get to fight a giant scorpion. I guess that was just too awesome for a Game Boy game to have in it. But still, you do get to go through levels and take down giant submarines, alien vehicles, and even aliens themselves. It is quite similar to the boss structure of Super C, but once again, it's not the same bosses. The levels are a very similar story. The smaller enemies are almost all the same from Super C. However, the levels themselves have their own structures and obstacles. I would almost compare this game to being like what modern gamers would call a DLC for the game Super C. It borrows from the same structure and just sort of expands with a smaller mission for players to get into. The weapons are a bit different for this game as well, adding the machine gun as your base weapon and expanding what will become a staple for the series with the homing missiles. And the homing missiles are awesome. So awesome that they sort of break the game a little bit. Because while it's cool to see them in the game, they're not balanced at all. Once you get them, you can take enemies out with no aim and little effort. This is due to the game having slower mechanics, which makes dodging way easier. Basically, once you get to homing missiles, the game just becomes a game of dodging and not so much of a run and gun, just more of a run. This game also brought in the idea of upgrading your weapons, which is the only Contra game of the retro ones to do this. It adds more depth to your playing style and trying to save weapons and avoiding newer ones so you can get to that upgrade. Overall though, the gameplay is very solid and it's a welcome addition to the Contra series. To me, Operation C fits in perfectly with the overall stories. The second Contra game for the Game Boy came out 3 years later, and instead of being a sequel to Operation C, it decided to simply be a clone of the SNES game, the Alien Wars, even carrying on the same name. And while the innovation of Operation C was lost and created its own game, the impact of Alien Wars was still felt. It was crazy to think that such an amazing SNES game could fit onto a Game Boy cartridge, but they did it, with some modifications of course. The graphics are toned down a bit, some of the backgrounds are missing, and some of the levels just didn't get imported over at all. However, the game feels just like the Alien Wars did on the SNES, and to any kid in the 90s, this is all you could hope for. You get the iconic turtle alien, the flying aliens to lift you away, the wall climber, the overhead levels with the same bosses, your bombs, you get the tank, and just so much more from the original game. This game felt amazing. And for kids who didn't have an SNES, this was their answer to their Contra yearning to play the Alien Wars. A lot of gamers this time are used to companies doing remakes of their home console classics. However, they often just sort of came off as cheap and wasn't what players were wanting. But this game, it lived up to what players wanted out of the Alien Wars. As an adult, I will admit I do prefer the originality of Operation C. For a kid in the 90s, the Alien Wars was almost 100% the preferred game just due to getting to replicate the experience of the SNES one. But both of these games showed just how much Konami cared when they brought Contra into the handheld market. And this really wasn't common at the time, because like I said, a lot of companies really messed up when they brought their series over to this particular market. They treated the Game Boy as more just a quick cash in, and they put some cheap games on it. However, Contra was definitely not in this boat. The company did their best to create unique experiences for the players, or as close of a clone as they could get for players to feel like they were playing the console classics. Either game is a welcome addition for any Game Boy collector and worth a playthrough. Me personally, I do prefer Operation C just because I like having more of a unique game, but I still love loading up the Alien Wars as well. But which game is your favorite? Which one do you think has held up better as the years have gone by? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, go out there, find a great game to play, and just simply have a great rest of the day.